I originally started with a narrative film idea. However, when I had to even write a vague idea for what genre it be, I found I had absolutely zero ideas. After a few days thinking of advert campaigns which went nowhere, one of my classmates suggested doing a video essay style documentary, which began to give me some ideas. I then decided I'd make a documentary and restarted my essay. For my FMP, I decided to create a participatory/performative documentary. I figured that in order to do this, I'd need to do some research into the evolution of documentaries as a medium. So I began with the first ever documentary, which I found to be Nanak of the North by Robert Flaherty in 1922, which was a film about Canadian Eskimos in the Arctic. Over time though, documentaries evolved into 6 key formats, those being expository, performative, reflective, participatory, poetic and observational. One example of this is the observational documentary Wiener, which was made by Josh Kriegman and Eyal Steinberg, about a 2016 mayoral campaign with a candidate as the same name. The initial idea was to create a documentary on a subject featuring myself as the host. Some of the codes and conventions of performatives are being a narrative, such as an investigation or search, as well as a direct audience address. And some of the key participatory conventions include the use of handycam and archive footage, as well as location shooting and interviews with subjects. In order to gain a better understanding of these specific documentary types, I decided to take a look at 2 of myself, those being Bowling for Columbine by Michael Moore in 2002 and The Most Hated Family in America made by Louis Theroux in 2007, in order to better understand documentaries. I looked at some of the key similarities and differences between the 2 filmmakers, including how both of them end up very involved in their works. Theroux almost becomes his own subject in The Most Hated Family in America, while Moore kind of experiments with people a bit. I'm not sure which of these I think I'd like to incorporate, if either. I like to kind of shoot straight when I'm asking questions of people, and I don't really want to become overly involved to the point of making a documentary on myself. Some differences between the documentaries is how Michael Moore is more of an activist and how he actively lets this show through his works, whereas Theroux attempts to come across as slightly more neutral, unless when faced with obvious wrongs such as the extremists at Westboro Baptist Church. Overall, I found both documentaries enjoyable, but I think I preferred Theroux's as it felt more like an insight into something rather than attempted a statement. I think it's worth noting both are trying to state something, but one feels more active in that than the other. So, before writing the section 3 of my essay, I had a conversation with my lecturers about what to do as a documentary subject. I had checked lots of sites online, but nowhere really had stuck out to me with anything particularly brilliant. So my lecturer came up with the idea of drawing up a list of all the ideas I'd had at all for documentaries, and then narrowing down everything I came up with into what's more feasible. So it wasn't actually until the following lesson, when I was talking to another lecturer, that the idea all kind of clicked in my head. Because you always hear people talking about how, like, oh, I could have done this sport or this thing if I'd known where to start. And that does tend to apply a lot specifically to sports. So what I thought I could do was take that idea and apply it to esports. When writing my section 3, I also identified that another student had done a documentary last year regarding esports and whether or not they were a valid sport, whether they weren't, what esports were, that kind of thing. So I figured in order to avoid treading over really any of that ground and invalidating my own documentary and theirs in the process, what I would do is actually kind of more directly tackle kind of what esports is like at the lower level. I wouldn't call it grassroots, but at the lower level. So because video games are a big hobby of mine, that's what I thought to do. So the aim overall of my documentary, I decided, is to show that it is possible to get into these kinds of fields, particularly regarding esports, regardless of where you're actually based. And so one way that I've actually been influenced is that in order to immerse myself in this particular subject, such as Michael Moore and Louis Theroux do, what I would do is enter an esports tournament in an area fairly near me, which should hopefully help me get a better idea of the subject and also create a more compelling participatory documentary rather than an observational one.